Good evening, everyone. I'm Christine Bragg, the Director of Autism Services at Easter Seals Midwest in Southwest Missouri. I want to welcome all of you to the second webinar of our four-part webinar series. Tonight's topic will be visual supports, and just to let you know that everyone will be muted throughout the presentation. As questions arise, we encourage you to use the chat or the Q&A box, and we will address as many of those questions as we can at the end of the presentation. But again, we'd love to have your feedback and questions. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bria Coale. Bria has a master's degree in special education and is a board certified behavior analyst with the Easter Seals ABA Clinic here in Springfield, Missouri. Her primary professional focus is early childhood, but she provides support and consultation for individuals with autism across all ages. She has 15 years experience supporting caregivers in schools, daycares, group homes, ISLs, and family homes. Bria, looking forward to hearing your information.
Thank you so much, Christine, for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen so we can get rolling here. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. And we will get started. So Christine already gave you an introduction to my background. I also want to share that I do have 3 kids of my own, and I share that because over the course of my career, I have used my kids as guinea pigs for a lot of things. And a lot of these visual supports that I'm going to share with you today, I have used on my own kids and I've used at home. So these are not just things that are, clinic-based or school-based. These are things that do actually work in the real world. So I do wanted to share that. I spent about 7 years working at a preschool with mostly typically developing children. We did have some with various developmental delays, used a lot of stuff for classroom management, things like that. I've also worked with teenagers, and they respond really well to these visual supports as well, especially those hygiene reminders. We'll talk more about that later. But let us dive in. So why visuals in the first place? Almost all young children are visual learners. We know that from some pretty solid research. About 65% of the general population report themselves to be visual learners. So it's a broad spectrum of people that learn best from seeing things, reading things, rather than just that auditory input. Some individuals with autism report to think in pictures, and that tells us that pictures help them to process the world around them. There are some really nice brain imaging studies that tell us that people on the spectrum have more advanced visual processing skills than their typical peers. So that, again, just really helps us understand that pictures are important. The biggest thing I want to stress today is that our brains kind of shut down when we're upset or stressed or escalated in any way. When we're happy, relaxed, engaged, calm, that's when we can learn and process things the best. But the second things get a little bit out of whack and we start to get escalated, that's when we don't process things as quickly, and it's really hard to process auditory input. So if somebody's trying to talk to us and we're escalated, listening to what they're saying, following those directions, that gets really challenging. Pictures are easier to process. So that visual cue gives us something to work with when our brains are dysregulated. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail, but it's a really important point for why this is important today. So what is a visual support? It is the systematic use of visual cues. That systematic use is really, really important. This is not just a one-time flashcard situation. We are going to use these consistently throughout the day, really across the lifespan. We're going to use these for very specific things and just to kind of cue life through different stages. It helps to clarify meaning of things, allows for prediction, Enhances teaching strategies. So if we're teaching somebody how to do something, we can add those visual supports to make it a little bit easier for them to learn and to remember so they can do it on their own later. It also provides for making choices. Again, just saying, hey, do you want this or this with just an auditory cue can be a little bit difficult, but if we have a visual choice, that can be easier to go with. I also want to stress that simple is okay. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be printed on the computer. It doesn't have to be laminated. We all get caught up into, I have to have this perfect Pinterest board presentation. It does not have to be that way. It can be super simple. So I hope you enjoy my little stick figure drawing over here. My example is that, you've gone to the restaurant with your family and your kiddo insisted upon wearing a hat. And if you're like me, my first response is, great, we're never going to see that hat again. So you want them to remember to put it back on when you leave. You draw this little stick figure on the back of a piece of paper, a receipt, whatever, and you stick it next to them on the table. And that helps them to maybe remember their hat when you leave. And you're not having to nag them about it. It's just a visual cue, little reminder, super simple. This is another example of something that we use in the clinic. This is a picture from a couple of weeks ago in the clinic setting. This kiddo can read like a champ. We're trying to work on making functional requests. He also likes to just sit in people's laps, so we're trying to work on him making an appropriate request to sit. So we just wrote "sit please" on the marker board and having him read it, and we're pairing that with, okay, yeah, great, thanks for asking, you can sit in my lap. So again, not something complicated. It's just helping use the skill he already has and kind of working it into, shaping it into a functional request. Just a marker board and a dry erase marker, easy peasy. Visuals can be used for 1,000 different things. So I talked a little bit about some of these, but we're gonna have choices, signaling what reinforcement might be available, predicting what's happening next on a schedule, teaching skills. We're really focusing on increasing independence. We can also increase organizational skills. We want to improve communication and social skills, promote task completion, and a big piece of this is making abstract concepts more concrete. People with autism are very literal most of the time, and some of those abstract concepts that exist in the world are really difficult for them to process sometimes, and visuals can make those things a lot more concrete for them. And that can be really important in teaching strategies and communication, social skills, all those things. Okay, let's dive into what visual supports can look like. So we're going to start with making choices. This is really important from young kids all the way up to adults. We want to have choices in our life. We do not want to have somebody telling us what to do all the time. So how can we help make that easier? Activity choice boards are a really common example. So how do you create an activity choice board? You want to identify preferred activities, and those can be literally anything, whatever the person likes to do. The younger the individual, you want to probably limit the choices. But if you have, somebody that's older that can process from a different array of things, then you can have, 20 things on a choice board if you want to. But you want to print pictures to represent the available choices. And, I usually recommend making it customizable so you can change things out. You're not having the same thing on there all the time. And then you want to provide access to the choice board when free time is available. So here's an example of what that can look like. This is, again, a choice board of what we can use in the clinic setting. Here's the toys, activities that are available to them during their free time. They can, sometimes this will be on a card where it's Velcro and they can pull it off and hand it to me, or they can just point. So again, it doesn't have to be pretty and fun and laminated. It just needs to be representative. You could make a choice board at home just on a piece of paper and write Play-Doh, write, notebook if they like to journal, write computer time, whatever it is. But that way, all they have to do is point. And they don't really have to tell you specifically using words, or it just kind of gives them some ideas to choose from as well. We also want to help them make good choices. And that is one of those abstract concepts that can be really difficult because it's like, oh, make good choices, oh, behave. What does that really even mean? So we want to make sure that we give them some clear strategies and clear expectations of what we want them to do. So we've got our visual representation of helpful or appropriate behaviors versus harmful or inappropriate behaviors. I do want to stress staying away from like good behavior versus bad behavior because, again, that's really abstract. It's really subjective, and we don't want to imply that they're, acting bad or something like that. So it's really just, is this behavior helpful or is this behavior harmful? And you can color code them. Red light, green light. Red light behaviors are things we need to stop and think before we act. Maybe this is a harmful behavior. Maybe this is I can do this at home, but not at school behavior. We want them to stop and think about it. Green light behaviors are available all the time. These are things that are helpful, that are not, we don't really have to worry about it. We can just do these things all the time. So again, here's a visual example of what I'm talking about. We're going to talk them through what this means too, because I feel angry can be a little bit abstract, a little bit subjective. So maybe we help them understand the triggers that might cause them to feel angry. So, somebody took the toy I was playing with. I feel angry. So you can label that for them. You're angry, and show them these are the choices of the things that they can do. So they can do rainbow breaths. They can listen to music. They can go on the crash pad. Those are their, green light choices. Screaming and throwing toys aren't really an option in this particular moment. So we're going to put those on our red light behaviors. It is really important when you're creating these behavior choice boards that you talk through it. We're going to teach them how to use it. This is not something you can just put up and expect somebody to know what to do with. Things like, like rainbow breaths, those are great, but what are they? So if the person you're working with doesn't know what rainbow breaths are, then there's a teaching moment, and we can work through showing them what that looks like. But then once you've taught that, you can just use that label for that option. So make sure that you're working on it. We also want to teach these things when they are relaxed and engaged. When somebody's upset is not the time to teach new skills or introduce even a new visual support. We want to introduce these when we're already happy, everything's good, and we're open to learning and processing new things. So we want to review and rehearse when you're relaxed and engaged. Put it up so it's available. Make sure that this is not something they have to look for. This just needs to be available to them. It's up on the wall. So if they do get a little bit upset, all you got to do is point to it. Direct them to their choices and prompt them to choose one. If you've practiced it, then they're going to know what to do. So ideally, that's how it works in practice. And again, these things are all very customizable. So you can do whatever works for the person that you are supporting. Here's just a couple of examples of visuals that can help with labeling emotions. Those emotions are very abstract, very hard to share. Sometimes asking somebody how they're feeling and expecting a verbal description can be really overwhelming for that person. So here's a couple of barometers that they can just point to. It can also help them understand what those feelings feel like in their bodies. So if you're working on, I feel angry, okay, what does that feel like? Does your face turn red? Do you feel hot? Are you balling up your fists? So helping them understand the physiological things that happen to their body when they're feeling angry can help them label that in the future. So again, these are just kind of up there to talk through. We want to help them label those emotions and maybe find some coping strategies before we get to these red meltdown, crisis stage. We want to, help prevent that from happening in the first place. So if we're feeling a little in the yellow zone, we're frustrated, we're somewhat upset, then maybe that's when we prompt our behavior choice board of what can we do to help return to a more baseline emotional state. So let's talk about reinforcement. This is a big one for visuals because we want people to know that reinforcement is always available. And sometimes they need to know exactly when and how. Token system. These are things you'll see a lot in classrooms, especially with young children. It's just a sticker chart, essentially. So you put, I am working for whatever that reinforcer is. And that can be, literally anything, whatever that person wants to choose. And then it shows them how many steps do I have until I get there? So again, it makes it a lot less abstract and a lot more concrete. I know exactly what the expectations are. And, maybe if you tell me to do something big, I'm kind of melt down and shut down. But if you break it into little five steps, okay, now it's manageable. Now it's a bite-sized piece and I can handle that. Probably the most common and well-known is a potty chart. When you're toilet training a child, you use that sticker chart. It's a perfect example. So for this one, I just put a little picture of a swing, and whenever Sally sits on the potty and goes through the motions of toilet training, and she does that 5 times, she gets to go out and swing outside and swing. These work really well when the stickers themselves are reinforcing, but you can also make whatever, like a Velcro picture of something to put on there. That works as well. You can also pair the sticker with an edible reinforcement. So a big fan of mini M&Ms. They work great with kind of making those stickers a little bit more reinforcing themselves, so we don't have to go out to the swing every single time. Just makes it a little bit easier. So I want to talk about this one. I got this off of Pinterest. These are available for download, purchase. You can print them. If you just Google a sticker chart or a token board, this is probably what comes up. And this is not a bad thing. I just kind of want to talk through some of the challenges that it might present. You'll also see these a lot in classrooms where, the class has a contingency where we're all working on, good behavior, and we get a sticker throughout the week. So this one, for example, has 22 spots on it. So unless you're reinforcing very, very frequently, 22 spots can be a lot. So like I said, in a classroom setting, sometimes you'll see this where we start on Monday, and if we fill up the chart and we get to that fire truck at the end, then on Friday we get something out of the treasure box. Well, that reward on Friday can be a really tough ask for good behavior on Monday. So not to say that these aren't effective for some people, I just think it's really, really important to think about adding some additional reinforcement. So maybe every 5 places we earn something smaller. But just you have to really know the people that you are supporting to know how much reinforcement they need, and don't feel like it has to be 22 spots. It can be 2 spots, whatever they are ready for in that moment. Behavior contracts. This is something that can be really, really simple or really, really complicated. So essentially, it just informs the individual of what is expected and what they're going to get in return. It holds both parties accountable. So I'm going to agree that you're going to do this, and I'm going to do this in return. So we are all deciding on how this is going to work. It can be in written form, like a regular contract, or it can just be pictures. It can be really simple or very complex depending on what the needs of the person are. So an example of a really simple one is a first then visual. So you just put first we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. It's all picture based. You could write words on there if you want to, but it's just a very, very simple when you do this, then you get this behavior contract. Shows them exactly what the expectations are. You can pair this with a token system to make it a little bit more reinforcing. But sometimes all they need is just to be able to see what's going on. This one's a little bit more complicated, and we're using words for this one. So here's the expectations. First, we're going to take out the trash, fold the laundry, put away the dishes. Then we get to go to Pizza Hut. So pretty basic, but very much outlines the expectations and the reward that's available. This one is even more complicated. So this one is actually something that was put together for a student that was getting in trouble because they were late for school a lot. And they were late for school because they weren't getting ready in the morning, and parents couldn't get them in the car on time. So this is the deal. You know, the students' expectations were get up at 7:30, do all the tasks on their morning checklist, which we'll talk about it a little bit. Be ready with shoes on to leave the house at 8:15. So you might want to more specifically define what being ready looks like, but you know, doesn't have to be included in the contract necessarily, but it definitely could be. And then completing homework as assigned each day. So the parents' end of this bargain is that they're going to take them to school on time every day. They're going to gather information about how their students' day went and what homework they have so that they can support them in making sure they get their homework done. And then they're going to provide access to the video games for an hour each night when 1 through 4 is completed. And this is really, really important because if you're going to have the behavior contract like this, it needs to be contingent only upon the behavior that's in the contract. So if the child does all the things in step 1 through 4, but then maybe they get in trouble at school or they hit a sibling later that night, you know, it's really important that they still get access to the video games because they completed the expectations of the contract. There can be different consequences for those other behaviors that may need to be addressed, but you know, the contract is really important and it needs to be held up on both sides. And this can be in place for a couple of days. It can be in place for months, you know, whatever's going to work for the situation. The beauty of these is you can always write a new one. So those are just kind of a nice checklist and deal that everybody agrees to. Organization. This can be really helpful in just keeping life a little less stressful and easier to manage for a variety of reasons. So let's talk about those. Labels, super simple. Show kids where stuff goes. These, you know, these are kind of pictures and words in this example, can be either or both, but you know, where do the trains go? Pretty obvious where the trains go at this point. So again, taking those abstract concepts and making them concrete. It's also teaching vocabulary because we are pairing that word with the picture, supporting reading skills. And again, just where do things go? We can also help set boundaries with some different visual guidelines. You can use colored tape or different textures to designate areas of a room or hallways. You'll see this sometimes in elementary schools. They'll have, you know, little footprints going down the hallway. Perfect example of a visual guideline. Helps those kindergartners know which side of the hallway they're supposed to walk on. And, you know, visitors to the building that may not know where to go, those kinds of things. It's just a really easy visual support. You can organize a larger space to create kind of defined spaces within that room too, so kids know where to be and where to go. So I've got a couple examples for that. So we have a kiddo named Caleb who likes to spin during breaks. Spinning is great, but spinning may get a little bit distracting or challenging for other students in the room. Or if we are at the mall or something like that, we want to make sure we're keeping everybody safe. So if we just designate a square in the space, and that is Caleb's spinning square. And anytime he needs to spin, that's where he can go to do it. Makes it a safe space available to him, keeps everybody around him safe. Now, sometimes it's even possible if you are out and about in the community, maybe you set up a little safe spinning space in the middle of the mall. You know, it's doable. It's providing that boundary for Caleb to be able to do what he needs to do to help keep himself regulated. Another example is break circle. So in this case, Lily has her break chair, and this blue circle can represent that break chair. So I included a picture of it, and you can see that the chair is kind of a blue circle. So you could have a picture of the chair itself, or we just have this blue circle. Lily can have a card on her desk of that blue circle. So when she needs to go sit in her chair, she can take that card to the teacher and request that break. She doesn't have to say anything. She doesn't even really have to like interrupt the class. She can get up, hand it to the teacher, go to her break circle. Gives her an opportunity to access that kind of sensory break that maybe she needs without having to talk to anybody. That can be a big trigger sometimes, especially if we're already feeling overwhelmed. Having to go ask the teacher is really difficult. So using that visual support to access that break that's available. Communication. This is probably the thing that we use the most in a clinic setting to, with visual supports and things like that, trying to help, I work specifically with really young kids, and most of them don't have full sentences. So we use a lot of picture cues that can help them communicate. Timers are visual. So before we get too far into communication, I do want to talk about timers. These, it depends on the person. Some people love timers. Some people can get a little bit upset by them. But I will say, generally a big trigger for people, I would say in general, but probably most specifically with autism, is walking in and saying, okay, it's time to go, let's go, when they're engaged in something. And it doesn't matter what that something is. They could be watching TV, they could be staring out the window, they could be playing a video game. But that transition from my brain is focused on this to listening to you telling them what's happening to now I'm expected to get up and respond and move. That is a really difficult transition to make sometimes. Timers can be really helpful with that. So there's different kinds of visual timers. They can also just be, a timer on your phone that goes off, and it's an auditory timer, but you can usually see the circle with the countdown as well. But I also recommend just using a 5-finger countdown sometimes. Like, okay, we are going to leave in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sometimes just that simple 5 seconds can make a huge difference in the response that is given. But again, pair it with that visual. Don't just count down with that auditory cue. So, using these in different scenarios obviously is going to apply differently. We use all kinds of different timers with our kiddos here in the clinic. And it depends on the kiddo which ones we use, because everybody has their preferences, but they can be very, very helpful. Reminder cards can be a good thing for helping kids, these work for adults, to remember what to do just throughout various situations. So like the quiet card, if you go into a library, sometimes it's hard to remember that we've got to use that inside voice or whisper. So carrying the quiet card and just setting it on the table, or putting it in your pocket so you can just pull it out if perhaps, somebody's volume gets a little bit high. It's quiet, it's subtle. You're not going shh, which can also be a trigger sometimes. So just carrying that card with you for, those times when it's important to remind them to be quiet. The wait card can be great for moms on the phone, and my attention is not available right now. I'm just going to hold up that wait card. So when the child comes up with the 480th thing that they need, because they wait till you're on the phone to need anything, you can just hold up that wait card and lets them know, hey, not right now, you need to wait. You can also pull that out when you're standing in line, or just you ordered food at the drive-through and They tell you to pull up because it's going to be 3 minutes for your French fries. Break out that wait card. Sometimes you just got to wait for a second. And that's can be really abstract, especially for young kids of just like, hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute never means a minute. So that wait card gives them a visual of they still don't know how long, but as long as it's there, they know it's not now. So it just helps process a little bit. And then the listen card can be really good for I need your attention. Kids do well with things. What are you doing? Rather than just stop doing something. I need you to put on your listening ears. Let's get them out right now. We're going to put them on. So, an example of, something that they can do. Picture cards. These are great for communication. They can make requests, get their wants and needs met efficiently and effectively. Again, talking can be a really tough thing sometimes, especially if you're upset about something, if you're really, really hungry, just communicating verbally is really tough. So sometimes you just need an easier way to do it. You can identify preferences, make choices, initiate social interactions. So we'll talk a little bit about how we can help with those social skills using some of these things. A good example of just kind of a life example is, I said earlier, I have 3 kids. I ask them all the time, what do you want for dinner? The response I get, I don't know. I don't care. They're very helpful in that vein. But if I make something they don't like, they're very vocal about letting me know that that is not what they wanted. So I did find, thankfully, a few years ago, if I give them choices, sometimes they'll choose one. So, we just write on the fridge. My fridge is a marker board. It's fabulous. If you have not done that yet, I highly recommend. Here's the things that we have. What do you want for dinner? Pick something. We're much more inclined to pick something from the choices than just abstractly from everything that's available in the world. So that's a pro tip from a mom of 3. So here's some picture card examples. Again, I just took these from our clinic setting. We have access to the swing, definitely a huge reinforcer. Blocks showing that, they can play with blocks. Pizza, sometimes it's just, hey, I'm hungry. Sometimes it's, I really want specifically pizza, but these are just examples of things that you can, have available, can make really good choices of, what's available for dinner. And then this last one, is all done. Really, really good way to end an activity. If this is not your jam and you don't want to do this right now, you hand me that all done card. Great. We're going to take a break. That doesn't mean we don't go back to it sometimes, but we're going to let you be all done for right now. Conversation cue cards. This is where we're going to talk about social skills and how helpful those can be. Social anxiety is really, really, really common. It is really hard sometimes to walk into a social situation and you don't really know what you're supposed to do. So these cue cards can give you examples of what to say. You can write a script on them, just kind of give them something to go off of. So let me show you some examples. Random social greetings. What am I supposed to say? Small talk is the worst, right? So just, how are you? How is your family? How was your weekend? Just examples of things you can ask if you find yourself in a situation that you're having to make small talk with people. There's kind of school-based small talk questions. If you've sitting next to a new person because the teacher's saying change the seating chart, that can be a huge social anxiety trigger because you've been sitting by the same person all year and suddenly there's a new person next to you. What do you say? Here's some things that you can ask them. A thing that came up in my family was my son needed to go pick up a prescription. He called me and was like, I don't know how to do this. So I made him a little cue card of here's what you go in, it's exactly what you say. And it was fine. But he was able to read off of that little index card what he was supposed to say, what he was asking for. It really helped to calm that social anxiety that had kind of crept up in him. And now he can pick up them up whenever he needs to, and it's not a problem. So these can be really good for just, I don't know what to say. What am I supposed to say? Well, here's some ideas. Task completion. These are huge. So a visual task analysis just breaks down a larger task into individual steps. So this can be for anything. The idea here is that we're teaching independence. You're not having to ask what the next step is. You as the caregiver are not having to constantly prompt and provide verbal support. It just, here's how it is. Now you'll have to teach the steps, but once the person is comfortable with the steps, you just stick that on the wall and now we know what to do. So toileting is a big one. Again, we just walk through. You can have a list. So one side is literally just the steps written out. The other side is the pictures. So if you're not a good reader or you just want the picture examples, there they are. Really important to know that you can get task analysis pictures in very graphic detail. So whatever task you're needing to work on, for example, taking a shower, showers can be overwhelming for people. They don't really know what to do. It's like, go shower. Okay, what does that mean? I don't like water on my body anyway, and now I have to work through all the stuff I'm supposed to do, and my brain shuts down, and all I do is stand in the bathroom. So if you put this on the wall, now we know what to do. Now we have pictures of everything we're supposed to wash. And like I said, this can be really detailed. I kept this pretty PG, but you can get pictures of all of the body parts and all of the details on how to wash those body parts. So if that's what the person needs, then that is great. Find what visuals work best for your people. But this can really help make showers independent, and not having to help so much with somebody that maybe just gets overwhelmed with the ideas of it all. There's also pictures and lists of how to turn the water off and on, how to check and make sure that the water's not too hot. All those things can be included in those hygiene tasks. Written rules are great. I'm going to go through some of these a little bit fast, but making sure that we have that structure and routine. So people with autism tend to like rules. They tend to be rule followers. What they don't like are abstract rules. I hear this a lot in especially teenagers with autism. It's like the world is following a rule book that they didn't get. So those rules are unclear. They just don't pick up the social cues like everybody else seems to. So let's make them more clear, make them concrete. So this example I have here, classroom rules, it's pretty good. But what's an inside voice? Have we taught that? Do we know what that means? Use kind words. What is kind words? What are kind words? What I feel is kind may not be the same as what you feel is kind. So, again, especially with those, literal, I don't understand why somebody might get their feelings hurt when I tell them something that's true. It's not that they're not being kind. They don't see it that way. So we really got to teach those skills before we just put kind of an abstract rule on something. But that doesn't mean that we can't, teach those things. Here is a example of rules, guidelines with some pictures. So we've got the shoes by the door. I included this picture because I like that some of the shoes are on the floor. I think this is a good example of being clear and set your expectations. The shoes are by the door, but if you want the shoes on the shelf, you should say that, because I could see there being situations where it's like, why aren't your shoes put away? Well, they're by the door, but they're not on the shelf where there's clearly a spot for them. So be very clear. Make those expectations, not abstract at all. Exactly what we're doing. Eat on the table or the couch. Some people really don't care where people eat in their house, and that's totally fine. But it's like, I really don't want you eating in my recliner. So say that. You can eat at the table or you can eat on the couch. That means that eating in your bed is not on the list. So that's not available. Dirty dishes go in the sink. Toys go in the bin, whatever it is, you can take a picture of your sink and put it on here if you want to. This particular one I pulled off the internet is just a picture of, it's a cartoon of the sink, but it, helps understand where they go. Don't be afraid to just clip stuff off the internet. You are not making products to sell, so just, copy and paste. Do what you need to do to make it easy. Lists. Lists can be really, really helpful for people who don't do well with go play. You have a Saturday stretching out before you. It's a beautiful day. And it's like, hey, we've got nothing scheduled. Just enjoy the day. That can be really, really hard for somebody that's not good at self-entertaining or just doesn't know what to do with their time. So make them a list. It's essentially a choice board, without pictures and, just ideas of things they can do. So you've got activities that you can do. Again, be specific. You can watch TV. Netflix or Disney Plus are your options. If you don't want them watching HBO Max, make sure that it's not available. Be specific of what you're allowing them to do. I put fish in the pond in the yard, not just go fishing. Because if it just says go fishing, they may run down the street to the pond in somebody else's yard and like, well, you didn't say where I could fish, So you got to be really specific on these things sometimes, but it's a great list of just options of what they can do. Hygiene lists. This is not a schedule. This is a list of what needs to be done at some point. So it's not like they have to do it in order or anything, but before you leave the house in the morning, you need to shower, brush your teeth, brush your hair, put on deodorant. Have you done all those things? Great, we're ready to walk out the door. Easy. This can be pictures too. So you've got your morning, you've got your bedtime, you're the things you need to do. Again, not a schedule, just a reminder of what is needing to be done. You can ask them, hey, did you check your list when they tell you that they're ready for bed? Getting low on time here, so I'm going to flip through these real quick, but if you've got somebody who's living in an ISL or their home where they have staff coming over, they would like to know who those people are probably. So you can write them down, hang it on the wall. Coping skills. Again, hang them up, put them on the wall. If you're escalated, what can you do to help calm down? I do want to show some examples of visual schedules really quickly. These can be really helpful. Gives the person some buy-in. I can move it over to the finished side. I know exactly what is going through the day. You can also change it. This is a game changer if you have to rearrange the schedule. I use this with my own very structure and routine kiddo would have a meltdown if we had to go, I had this visual schedule and then it was like, oh no, hey, we're going to run to the grocery store first and then go through the car wash. Meltdown. So I would just switch it like, hey, show them we're going to switch these up. Now it's on the schedule. Now we're good. Just need to know what's going on. You can do this with activities too. These are the things we're going to do. And once we get through all these things, then you're all done. And you can order it to where it's like, hey, this kiddo loves to color. Blocks aren't their favorite. We're going to do blocks first so we can kind of reinforce that with the coloring. Again, always changeable. Great to make things adjustable. This is a good example of a visual schedule that's just worked. Doesn't have to be complicated. They know what they need to do and the order in which they need to do it. This is an example of an app. I really, really like this one. If you're looking for something a little more electronic, it allows you to personalize things. It's got little timers in there. I would give them more than 2 minutes to eat dinner, but that's what the screenshot has. So, but you can, as soon as you hit that eat dinner button, the timer starts and they can see that. And then when they're all done, you just drag and drop it across and they move on to the next thing. Shows exactly what their reinforcements are available. It's really, really nice. And you can upload pictures of your own if you want to. There is a light version that's free that you can kind of try things out and play with it a little bit. The app itself is $25, which is a little on the pricey side, but it can be a game changer if you're looking for an electronic visual schedule situation. I did use this on my kids when they were in elementary school, made our mornings go so much smoother. Highly recommend. Calendars. Want to just talk quickly about calendars because all of these visual supports I've talked about are, yes, autism focused, but, I use my calendar every single day. So it is a visual support that everybody uses and is, very just kind of socially acceptable. It's just in the zeitgeist. We all have a calendar. So really important to point out that these visual supports aren't just for a couple of days or a week. I mean, I couldn't function without my calendar. It will never go away. And that is an appropriate visual support for me to be able to live my life in a functional manner. So, there's a bunch of different options with calendars. This is just a screenshot of a Google Calendar. I like to color code things because it works for my brain, but you do you, whatever works for you. You can change the font to make sure that things kind of stick out a little bit, but really important to note that like on the 20th on this calendar, there's no practice that night because we have a birthday dinner. So don't just put the birthday dinner on there. Make sure you also say, hey, there's no practice, because that is part of their routine. And you got to be specific about that stuff sometimes. So there's, apps that you can build calendars on, definitely a lot of options for that kind of thing. Um, Here are the references if you want to go read the research on how supportive visual supports can be and how effective they are. But I want to point out on this slide, Teachers Pay Teachers is a fantastic resource. You can download stuff and print it. Everything is really inexpensive, $2 or $3 a piece. There are tons of things on there. It can be a little bit difficult to navigate sometimes if you're looking for something specific. So if you have questions about like, how do I search for this? Sometimes you just need the right language. So, always ask for help if you just need to find something. And then the bvisual.com is that ChoiceWorks app website. There's a bunch of different resources on that too. And then the last thing is to save the date for the Kansas Autism Summit. That is an in-person conference that we're doing in Topeka in April. So keep an eye out for those details. All right, do we have questions?
Thank you, Bria, for a fantastic presentation and sharing your expertise with us. Please know that you'll be receiving an email with a survey for tonight's event. We would love for you to be able to fill that out and give us that feedback. And we will also be sending out information via email regarding the presentation. What questions do we have? Please fill the inbox with questions for us.
Briefly, just to reiterate what I said earlier about the importance of visual supports being an ongoing thing that people use. There are things that can be temporary, absolutely, but it's really important to remember that, we all use visual stuff throughout our lifetime. So, just because it's, I kind of hear this a lot. It's like, oh, I used that stuff on my kids when they were 3, but they don't use it now that they're 12. Like, bring it back. It will, if you're having some issues with your teenagers, bring back those visual supports. They may look different, but that may just be the thing that will help.
While everybody's thinking of some questions, just reminding that we have 2 more webinars in February, so we hope that you can join us for that time as well. Let me skip over. The question is, will there be any in-person Easter Seals events in St. Louis? Cynthia, there should be, if you go to our website or if you go to our social media page, there are information specifically on there about events in St. Louis. The next question is there a place online to find great suggestions for reward system?
Yes, there are a ton of great resources. Um, if you're looking for something to, I guess to print out, like I said, that Teachers Pay Teachers is a really great resource for that. It also has different ideas. It's a great place to look for stuff. Pinterest is another place to get really good ideas for reinforcement. Um, if you're looking for actual like tangible reinforcer items like toys and stuff like that, there's some great like learning resources. That's a name of a company. National Autism Resources has some really great, fidgets and things like that. Just kind of depends on what you're looking for. But, honestly, Pinterest is a great place to start because people have a million ideas on that of just where to, kind of launch some things. And they usually have resources.
And as Bria has already talked about, we have the Kansas Autism Summit in April. Bria is going to be presenting there. So if you want to come meet her in person and brainstorm some different apps and information, she would be happy to do that as well. Yeah, I think that we covered all the questions. Again, thank you in advance for completing the survey, and thank you for joining us tonight. Have a wonderful evening.